when that goes live are two different points. So everyone always finds that very interesting and entertaining, I am absolutely sure. So just a couple more minutes until I see it go live right here. And then there we are. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Lore Reloaded. A show so great we decided to make it 30 minutes late because we just can. Because just like CBS, we don't like doing this stuff on time. My co-host tonight will be the Anti-Trekker. You also know him as Rational Roundtable. Sir, how are you doing tonight?
Oh, not too bad. Still trying to figure out this app of yours.
Yeah, well, it's the only one that works for the moment. So, yeah, Skype wasn't working, and then we tried to get Discord, and Discord wasn't working. So, yeah, that was a lot of fun. But let's just get into it. Let's just get right down. So this is going to be Star Trek Discovery. Context is for Kings, the post show. If you don't like spoilers, I definitively would not suggest watching this. Of course, you can always enjoy this show much more if you become a sponsor or join my Patreon, because that's how that goes. We're going to just jump right into it. Michael, overall, what is your opinion of the show itself? So 1 out of 10, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst. What would you give this specific episode?
Well, it's hard to give it a fair rating because this is only episode 3. I think about SF Debris likes to rate every episode of a series based relative to the series overall. So if I were going to do that, then I would put this at a definitive 2. I think it is a big step down from the 2-part opener, and I did not like the 2-part opener.
So well, that's interesting. I actually, I don't know. Here's the problem with this show for me. I don't hate it. And I think that's one of the biggest problems. I don't love it.
That is a problem because you should hate it, but that's okay.
All right, so let's just break it down. So it starts out with, of course, 6 months later, and we have Michael, the not Mary Sue, which, by the way, someone told me I was sexist for calling her a Mary Sue. That was fun. She's now being
You should refer to her from now as a Michael Sue instead of a Mary Sue.
Michael Sue. I like that. That's what I'm going to do. Michael Sue. She's being transported to an unknown location. I don't know, just a random transfer. And all of a sudden, the ship is attacked by lightning bugs. Literal lightning bugs. Now, thank God for Michael, because Michael is there to tell us what these bugs do and how much of a problem this is. What I thought was funny is, first off, so you have the pilot, just one pilot with these convicts, one of them a known mutineer who assaulted her captain. And then the pilot has to leave to fix the issue on the outside. So the pilot leaves all of these prisoners with access to the console. I know they're like locked up or whatever, but there's still access to the console. And then you see the pilot go flying away, and all of a sudden the Discovery saves the day. My question is did the Discovery ever look for the pilot or want to help the pilot out? Because it seems like that was just a bad day. It's like, oh, well, guess we can't help him.
I get the distinct feeling. I think that some of the fan theories about the Discovery are correct in that it seems that the Discovery is a quote-unquote Section 31 ship, which is going to be their excuse for why everything they do is so against the philosophy of the Federation.
Well, but they didn't even attempt to save the pilot, which I thought was kind of funny.
Right, but if they're Section 31, why would they? The only thing they were interested in is Michael.
Well, that's true. I guess it's just bad luck for that pilot, and it's their fault. The bugs were there, I think, wasn't it? Didn't they say that, or was that just
they weren't explicit on it? But the thing is that like Section 31, with the exception of their portrayal in Star Trek Into Darkness, Section 31 is always like the mustache twirling villains of the Federation. I think they give them a little more depth in Star Trek Into Darkness, but not much more. This this is just like, yes, they're the evil dark side of the Federation, and Michael is the beaming, hopeful, whatever that we're supposed to love, even though she is completely full of crap every time she opens up her mouth.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's one of the things I was writing down. So what I always do with this show now, I want to give her the benefit of the doubt, but I always write down Mary Sue, and I write down when I think she does something that is a quote-unquote Mary Sue. So she instantly knows the bugs, how they work, what's going to happen to them. She doesn't seem to care. She's cool under pressure when everyone else thinks they're going to die. She knows Vulcan Jiu-Jitsu. Everyone tells her that she is, valuable.
Don't forget, she's better at quantum physics than the engineer that made his entire career out of developing these this quantum transporting technology.
Yeah, I thought that was, and she worked it all out in her head and everything too. I thought it's funny that she knows better than the specialists. I think this could be awesome, but the problem is with I think she could be an awesome character, but the problem is that she knows too much, and everyone talks about how awesome she is. If only she hadn't done that one thing. I don't know how people don't see her as a Mary Sue.
Well, the thing is, I think it's not even the Mary Sue thing, which she is. I'm going to stick to. She is a Michael Sue, but at the same time, it's really getting kind of grating that every time she has an interaction with somebody, we get reminded that she is the best person in the universe. The alien character is a Sora, or however you say his name. She's the most intelligent Starfleet officer I've ever encountered. And in the first episode, Captain Georgiou was like, "Oh yes, I would trust you with my life." Everybody just has to constantly remind us of how awesome she is. And I think the reason they keep trying to tell us how awesome she is because she doesn't demonstrate anything that would make me believe that she is awesome. She completely is insubordinate left and right. And then after being insubordinate left and right and breaking into a top secret facility, she gives a lecture that we're supposed to take seriously, that she believes in the principles of the Federation.
Yeah, that comes in later. But yeah, so keeping with the timeline. So they're in this shuttle. The pilot's gone. They're saved by the Discovery. I liked the shot of the Discovery itself at that point. I thought that was a cool little way that they spanned across it. What were your thoughts, at least when it comes to how they showed the ship? I know you're not a fan of the design itself, but the ship itself, I thought it was kind of cool how they came around it. And you actually noticed one thing, speaking to the Section 31 piece, the NCC is, what was it, 1031?
Correct. The Discovery looked like it was NCC 1031, which I think is supposedly a subtle nod that this is Section 31.
Right. Did you like the way they at least showed the ship? I thought it was cool when they panned around the Discovery itself.
Well, if the ship looked good, it would have been an awesome shot. I mean, overall, the one thing I will not complain about at all about Discovery is their visuals. The visual, the effects, the cinematography, all of that is top-notch. Some of the best you'll see in a television series, let alone a streaming service series. But the problem is that's the only thing they got going for them. And now, granted, I think the design of the Discovery itself looks like a 5-year-old tried to draw the Enterprise and couldn't quite remember what it was shaped like.
I don't know. You and me disagree on that. I think the design of it's fine, especially if it's supposed to be a Section 31 ship. It's supposed to be different, which is what they're kind of building it up to, that this does all kinds of secret scientific missions and all that good stuff. So I don't hate that. I love how they continually, at least when they first started, they said this was prime timeline, but everything about this screams Kelvin or Star Trek Reimagined. because you were pointing out a lot of this stuff. They had food synthesizers. They didn't have that at this stage of the game. What else? What other technology did they have that they didn't have beforehand? Because there was a couple of things. I didn't write it down. What other technologies did they have?
Well, there's a handful of things that kind of screw up the timeline thing, especially if they want to try to say they're prime and they quote unquote prime timeline. There is, of course, the fact that they called it food synthesizer instead of replicator, but in the original series, all the way through Star Trek VI, the Enterprise had a galley, an actual kitchen. And those little things where they got their food were more or less little transporter chutes where they would send their food to. The captain of the Discovery has a pet Tribble, which Tribbles didn't show up until midway through the original series, and everybody was like, "Ooh, what is that thing?" Another interesting thing that I didn't think of while we were watching it, but on my drive home, kind of jumped out at me, is that when they were showing off this incredible transporter technology that they're working on inventing, one of the places that that Michael was beamed to was the Romulan Senate. And in the original series episode, Balance of Terror, no one had ever seen a Romulan. That was a big plot point in that, because we find out that the Romulans look like Vulcans. But no one had ever seen a Romulan, and yet she's literally standing in the center of their capital city. And Section 31, or whatever they are, apparently have been there all along. And not to mention the holographic technology. The first time in Star Trek we have established, new experimental holographic technology was in Deep Space Nine. So even after the Next Generation time frame, the idea of organic power sources. Now you're talking Voyager tech, and so this show honestly should be taking place post Voyager. That's I would say, Kelvin timeline post Voyager as far as when it's taking place.
Right. Well, and Mr. Pete 8680 brings up that the food synthesizers are not the same as replicators. Even if they're not the same as replicators, they're not what was in the original timeline. The Enterprise did not, the original series Enterprise, Enterprise-A, did not have that. So, and wasn't the Enterprise-A supposed to be the most advanced ship they had, Constitution class? And it doesn't have what this ship has.
In Star Trek VI, the Enterprise was actually considered an aging ship. The Excelsior was the cutting edge ship in that movie. But that's not. But the thing is that, like I said, there's actually, and it's kind of an interesting scene where they go into the galley and you see the chefs working on the food and stuff. They didn't have the magic food machines that Next Generation loves to take advantage of. You couldn't just walk up to the machine and say, "Oh, I feel like chocolate cake." You had to, put in your little card, and they show this in the original series a few times, where you put in your little ID card into the machine, and then it gives you the food that you're supposed to get. And in fact, they also established in the original series that Dr. McCoy can monitor and maintain your diet, which is why you would need to do that. Because if Dr. McCoy says no sodium for this guy, when you put in your card, you're going to get a low sodium diet.
Right. So they did introduce what I think is probably the best character in the entire show, and I think you're going to agree with me. How'd you like Tilly?
I got to say this for Tilly, is they have now made it so that Michael Sue is not the most annoying character in the show. And get this, they have now dethroned Will Wheaton's Wesley Crusher as the most annoying character in Star Trek. Tilly is officially the Jar Jar Binks of Star Trek at this point.
Okay, I'll say this. She's annoying. I'll grant she's annoying, but she is somewhat, in my opinion, endearing. So they introduce a new character. For those who haven't watched it, Michael goes into her bunk room, and she has a new bunk mate who comes in later named Tilly. and they play it off. She's obviously the comedic character because she says, they didn't really put me with anyone because of my condition. And so every time she talks or does something, it's some kind of joke, or she comes off as very chatty. By the way, for a show that is supposed to be very feminine, strong, and just very PC, it's interesting that they make a female character a stereotype because she's very chatty, she's insecure about herself, and quite a few things that you would come from a young female stereotype. Yeah, it gets a little grating. She does a couple things that are funny. So I do think...
Let me say this, because Mr. Pete pointed out Neelix was more annoying than Wesley. I'll grant you that I wasn't thinking of Neelix, but she's still more annoying than Neelix because her entire character is, hey, I'm annoying. That's it.
No, I mean, you can see what they're trying to do. A young cadet that Michael's going to take under her wing and make into an officer that one day she's going to do a ship. I mean, you can see her arc from a mile away. I don't think she's annoying as Neelix. There's nobody annoying.
Well, okay, here's the thing. If you want to say, and fine, if you want to put in a young, newbie on the ship that's trying to make make it in Starfleet, and Michael's going to help her along. That's all great, but they make her completely inept at everything. She is allergic to mattresses. This is not a joke. This is in the show. She is allergic to the mattresses. She can't stop talking. She's paranoid about what everybody thinks of her.
She snores.
And the thing, and she's a chronic snorer. That's what her mattress allergy apparently makes her snore. That's a new one. But, and the thing is that, and by the way, she doesn't see her condition. She says, my special needs, which I find personally offensive as a parent of a special needs kid.
Yeah, I thought that as soon as I heard that, I thought you'd get frustrated with that when they said that. And even for me, even though my kid's issue, I don't think she still has issues, but it's not comparable. It's apples to oranges. Even me, I was kind of annoyed at that because I wish that was a quote unquote special need for my kid, right? So I think that was definitely the wrong word for whoever decided to write it. She's annoying, but sometimes she's endearing, I guess. I don't know. So she meets her bunkmate and then continues on to her what she's going to be doing for as long until they fix the ship to send her off to, I don't know, wherever, New Zealand's land of utopia prison space. And what I think's funny is, like you said, at the end of the show, she gets very righteous with the captain. But there's this secured area, and apparently, what was it? It was an engineering lab. There are in the entire Federation, there are no engineering labs that are top secret, or are what was the word? Was it top secret? She didn't use that. That were restricted.
They said it was above top secret.
Oh, and apparently, no engineering labs ever are above that. So first off, again, Mary Sue, she instantly knows that about the Federation, and I think that's just a ridiculous statement. So,
but here's the other thing about that. Speaking of the Michael Sue thing about her character, so she finds out there's this top secret engineering lab that you have to have a breath print in order to access, which is laughable in and of itself. But then within 10 seconds, she's manufactured a device to forge a breath print.
Right, which... who would, I don't know. Maybe they're trying to be special about it, but it would seem to me that you wouldn't even need to do what she did to get a breath. It would seem like, first off, I don't know how a breath is at any point specialized like an eye or a fingerprint. But beyond that, it seems like you could create a device that would be able to manufacture that a lot easier than manufacturing an eye or a handprint.
Well, and it's so stupid. That's the thing. It's like, Star Trek in the past has had biometric locks before, and usually you have to hold your hand up or something like that. And that's like good protocol security where you put your palm on a door thing and then it'll open. But they put breath print on there, and by the way, that is the term they used.
Right.
But they have a breath print access. The only reason they do that is because you don't want Michael to cut off Tilly's hand and put it in there. So instead, she just has to sneak some breath from her snoring, and then she can do it.
And so Beyond News brings up a great point. This was awesome. So this is supposed to be like the latest ship, one of the newest pieces of technology, brand new ship. They go out of their way to point that out, that there's no scratches on it, that it's right out of the docking bay, right? It was just made. State-of-the-art technology defeated by a napkin. She used a napkin to get the breath print. So she goes in there, and apparently that was in Spaceballs. So she goes in there.
It was, actually. They did use that in Spaceballs.
So she goes in there, she sees the biome or whatever, and apparently they know about it. I guess this is part of his test, but they know she got in. And after that, we get some character growth with the other characters. So Saru, or the science officer, I actually like him. I know you don't, but I actually like him. I think he's better well-rounded than Michael, for sure.
I think he was better in this episode. He's one of the few things that improved. I think Michael's worse in this episode, but I think Saru actually showed a little more interesting character. He didn't just come across as a whiny coward in this one.
Right. And so there's some good back and forth with them, and he's talking about how he likes her, but he can't trust her, which I think is really well done. You meet the engineer, who him and his friend are apparently friend, quote unquote. Did you get a sense that there was something going on there?
No, they straight up. It was obvious they were a gay couple, but they were separated on different ships, and they were very frustrated by that fact.
Right. And I thought that was fine. I thought that was very well
done. I didn't have
a
problem.
Yeah.
I don't care about the sexual orientation thing, but I think it was completely unnecessary. Because if there was some consequence to their relationship, fine. But other than the fact that this guy is also doesn't belong on this ship. And by the way, what's Saru doing on this ship? This ship is doing some, mustache twirling villain evil stuff, and yet Saru is going to be first officer.
Right. Well, yeah, it's kind of lucky how a lot of the crew, because he wasn't the only one. There were other pieces of the crew, other crew from the Shenzhou that actually made it onto the Discovery. So it wasn't that lucky that happened. I understand that they're going to have to kind of quote unquote do that, but I think that was kind of it's on the edges of breaking the fourth wall for me. Angry Mr. Flibble brings up a good point. They said the USS Shenzhou, which is NCC 1227, was an old ship, and now the USS Discovery, NCC 1031, is a new ship, even though it has a lower NCC number. Which is a good point. Though, in theory, I guess they could have said, in theory, they don't have to be concurrent, or you could say maybe the 1000 series or Section 31, so they're going slower or something like that. I don't know. That can be explained away. Let's talk about the next piece.
One quick thing before we move forward, because one thing you kind of skipped over as far as when they boarded the Discovery, is Rekha Sharma. I'm sure I'm butchering her name, but she was Tori Foster in Battlestar Galactica. Is the chief of security on the Discovery, and I'll give her this. She's one of the few characters I actually believed in her role. She looked like, I'm not taking anything from anybody. I'm the chief of security. You mess around with me, and I will shoot you.
Right, I agree. And she doesn't trust her for obvious reasons. And I thought she was pretty realistic. And it's funny, they played a part with her, and it's either in another show or another episode, or they just cut it, but they were talking about how no one trusts her on the ship with the captain. I like the fact that she isn't trusting, because as the security officer, she wouldn't. If I was chief of security, I'd have a huge issue with having Michael on there. So I agree. I think it was realistic. She didn't have really a huge piece in this episode, though. You know.
I just want to make sure, you know, because I've been called a sexist a few times already because of my opinion on this show. I think that she is actually one of the stronger characters in the show, which even though she had a very small part, I thought she was good. And I also want to be fair in that there are some good things I saw in the show. It's just overall, I think the show was garbage.
Right. Well, and what's funny is when you gave her accolades, we actually got a thumb down, so we're not allowed to do that. Apparently.
I know sexists out there.
So we're going to the next part. Their sister ship had an issue. Something crazy occurred on it, and they have to go. And so what does the captain decide to do? Well, first off, the captain and the engineer get into it, and the engineer is a lot more, I would say, mouthy than I think you probably would be on a ship during wartime. But maybe that's just their style. We'll let that go. It's funny because the engineer talks about needing an entire crew, or not crew, but a team, and the captain tells him to take the prisoner mutineer who caused the war. And she has to go, but that is still just frustrating because it just completely breaks it.
Well, I would buy this much from, oh gosh, what's his name? Captain Lorca or something like that.
Lorca.
I would buy this from Captain Lorca in that he obviously sees something in her and wants her on his crew. And so he's putting her through these situations to try and see how good she really is. I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is the insubordination from the engineer, because not only is this a Starfleet vessel in a time of war, but a Black Ops vessel at that. And so, you know, I'm sorry, but that makes no sense. I mean, where's Chief Security shooting him down at that point? Because he was, you know, the way he went off, that he should have been locked up.
Well,
the other thing, and you tell me what you think on this, because I think this is interesting after watching this episode. Of course, everybody refers to Michael, when they have a negative feeling about her, as the person who started this war. And you refer to her that way as well, and that's why I want to get into this. She didn't. She did nothing to cause the war, because if you take her out of the first two episodes completely, it goes down exactly the same way, except that Captain Georgiou might have lived. But the only thing she's really responsible for is she's a mutineer, and she deserves to be put up on charges for that. But the Klingons eventually just started blasting the crap out of the Federation ships. Nothing she did started the war, triggered the war, caused a single death directly, except for the fact that she was on the away team when Captain Georgiou was killed.
Nah, at the very least, she legitimized the war for the Klingons. Had she not been there, let's assume that you're right and that nothing she did caused their attack, which is fine. I could see that.
Well, the Klingons wanted a war.
Yeah, but she legitimized it. She landed on the ship, killed one of their crew, and then targeted their ship twice. And at one point was about to blow it all to hell. So at the very minimum, she legitimized the war. Let's.
I would buy that, James, if the Klingons even made a passing remark about it. They didn't care. In fact, they celebrated this guy, that he died with honor and all that, and then they sent out the albino to light the torch. They never said, "You killed our guy, and therefore we're going to blast you out of this." No.
Please don't yell. Here's the thing.
Sorry, it's hard not to yell when I'm talking about this show.
From a Federation standpoint, she legitimized the war. If this had happened in the real life, if a Russian ship was in U.S. territory and wasn't answering hells, and they sent somebody over there who was just supposed to go past it and then landed on it, killed a guard, and came back, you're not telling me that the Russians wouldn't use that as a legitimate reason for attack. So I don't think you can. I think at a minimum she legitimized the war, and I do think that they could have done it differently if she hadn't been there. But we're sidetracking. I'll let you get the last word on this,
sure.
And then
I just want to respond to angry Mr. Flibble. There is that she did kill Takumva, or however you say his name, and that is true. However, again, would the war have started? Yes. And if she wasn't there to beam over and be Michael Sue on the Klingon ship and take on Klingons hand to hand, anybody that beamed over would have been killed anyway. And so I don't think that ultimately the outcome of what happened after the first two episodes, after the Battle of the Binary Stars, which I love, that's the name of the episode, and then in this episode they refer to the battle as the name of the other episode. But I don't think that, as from a historical perspective, anything significant would have been different if she had nothing to do with it.
You don't get brownie points because it would have happened anyway. If a person jumps off a 5-story building, you shoot a gun through a window, hit and kill them before they hit the ground, have you still committed murder?
That's an interesting philosophical question, but that's not an appropriate analogy.
I'm just saying, just because the outcome would have been the same doesn't mean that you get off scot-free. But let's continue on.
Well, and she didn't. She was sentenced to life in prison for mutiny,
and then she got to. Okay, so let's.
She served 6 months, which I have to say is more than I thought she would.
Yeah. So they go to the sister ship, which has had some kind of catastrophic issue happen, and they land on it. Well, before that, let's talk about the engineer for a second. So they're on their way to land on the ship, and you have the engineer officer. And the first time he got into a fight with the captain, I could understand being thrown in the brig to just chill out, because you do have to listen to orders on a Black Ops ship, and during a war, if you argue, people die. So you do have to do what you're told. And so being told to chill out or being put in the brig, but nothing major happening, I think is legitimate. But he's on this shuttle during this away mission and starts calling the captain a war monster. What did he say? A warmonger?
Yeah, he called him a warmonger.
Yeah, and he says he doesn't want his scientific research to help out the warmonger captain. He assumed that Michael had something to do with it. I think at that point you have now committed treason during a time of war, at a minimum shouldn't serve on a Black Ops unit, given how you feel about everything that's going on. And I'm surprised that no negatives occurred with that. Would you agree?
That he didn't get brought up on charges or something?
Yeah.
No, that's why I say he should be in the brig.
Right. No, I mean, but there were two different instances. He got in a fight with the captain. I think for that you should be put in the brig for a couple hours just to chill out. But when you call the captain a warmonger and obviously don't want to support what's happening, yeah, then you should be brought up on charges and sent away. Wouldn't you agree? Especially during a time of war. So. I thought that.
By the way, if you can take a look at the picture I just sent you, that's from an episode of In Living Color, and look at the ship there, and if you can, put it on the screen, because it is laughable how similar that is to the Discovery.
And then and I'll be looking at that. I'll try bringing it up the screen. But then what's crazy to me is that we moved to Star Trek.
Don't you even go track on me.
Star Trek Aliens 4, which I thought was interesting. Did you like the alien that popped up?
I don't know that I would use the word like. I thought it was, I mean, I guess it's like a mutated Klingon or something. But, yeah, I thought, I mean, it's like, it didn't serve a purpose other than to show that the captain is definitely up to something. It didn't, it was just there to add tension to the show, and to try and show, ooh, look how much more of a badass she is, because once again, not only is she the only person that can figure out how to defeat the unstoppable killer alien, but she manages to do it by knowing the layout of the ducts of a class of starship that didn't even exist at the time that she was sentenced for life in prison.
No, we're not even getting to that yet. Hold on, we're going to come back to that. But the alien itself, I love the fact, first off, there are Klingons on this ship, with no indication of that there were Klingons even near it. There were no other ships. You would think that they'd pick up the trail. I mean, what happened? Did the Klingons come in, beam some people over, and then they were like, well, I guess our job here is done. Let's get the hell out of here, and just left with their ship. Where did the Klingons go? So they never explain how the Klingons even got on there. And then they have this alien, and they do what can only be described as at best, homage, if you will, to aliens, because that's exactly what it was. It was a bunch of people scared for their lives running from an alien.
Well, it was actually like the first Alien, because in fact there was a couple of scenes were ripped right off from it, including her climbing through the Jeffries tube that they just happened to make look just like the ducts in Alien when I can't remember the Captain Dallas in Alien was climbing through the ducts with a flamethrower trying to avoid getting killed. It's just that she was climbing through the ducts with a phaser.
Right. And so we get to that part. So first off, then they run into the engineering bay, and what, if you weren't paying attention, you'd miss it. But what I kind of thought was funny was, so the main engineer, the top of the top, this guy who's not going to let his science be used for murder, comes in, and there were a couple of things they were looking at that he apparently didn't know what they were. So he was just like, let's just take it. I don't know what that is. Let's take it. But apparently he helped create all of this. And so at this point, it gets to where you were talking about, where she says, I hope that all ships are made the same. And she starts to go into the ducts, like you say. And it's crazy because apparently the USS Shinzo, which doesn't look anything like it, the Enterprise and X-01, they're all made the same. And all of the Jeffrey tubes work exactly the same way, even though none of them have the same amount of decks. They all work in the same way, so she knows instantly where they go.
Well, and get this, is that because when she climbs through these ducts to escape the monster, then she finds the secret control panel to open up a trap door that drops her into the shuttle that everybody else is waiting in. Literally, she opens up a trap door and drops. How did the shuttle have a door at the top of it? I don't know. But apparently the shuttle had an open door at the top because she just drops right into the shuttle. And so not only does she know the ductwork, and apparently Starfleet makes every ship's ducts lay out the same way, but they somehow violate the laws of physics doing it because she's in the hangar deck in a section of the ship that doesn't exist in the Shinzo. The Shinzo doesn't have the lower hull big triangle thing, which is where the hangar deck is.
Well, but I mean, it probably was designed the same way, and leads to nowhere in the Shinzo, or Shinzo, or however you say it. But just for this specifically. And what's great is I love how they brought continuity together. So here's probably the greatest scene. So from anyone who has watched the original series or the movies, you remember how Spock would talk ad nauseum about how his mom would read to them and would read ancient human literature. It was literally in every episode and every movie. And how he talked about Alice in Wonderland and how him and his sister were impacted by that to the point that she had memorized it during an intense situation. And I just loved the continuity put together there with that. Wouldn't you agree with me, Michael, on how the continuity with that was so well done?
Well, yeah, because, we all know that not only does Ambassador Sarek and his wife read, classic human literature to, while they were on Vulcan, but they're also it's well known that Sarek had much more time for his adopted daughter than he did for Spock. Because, of course, you remember in the original series, he and Spock had not spoken for over a decade, which means that he was busy talking to her instead of Spock.
Exactly.
And of course, we also find out, as we all know from classic Star Trek, that Vulcans, can also now use the Force to speak to somebody, no matter where they are in the universe.
Right. Well, that's going back to one of the first episodes. So they get the stuff. She, being the Michael Sue that she is, valiantly self-sacrifices herself and gets the monster away. And then drops down, and they all escape, and they get onto the ship. You brought up a part that I guess So there were two pieces when she got back. Well, three pieces. First, the part with Tilly. I do like the aspect between them that she's coming under her wing. I do. And that you're going to see the growth with Tilly. I also like the science officer Saru. I like their relationship, Michael and Saru, feels natural to me. It feels like they used to be friends, and that he felt betrayed, and that he does care for her. Did you get that sense or not really? Because that at least felt.
Remember, one of the few things that actually improved in this show was Saru as a character. I did get the feeling that he respected Michael's abilities and he honored their friendship that they had for a long time, but he also felt very much betrayed by what she did. And, you know, when people refer to her as the mutineer, that's fine. That's what she is. I don't like the whole she caused the war thing, but I think that Saru, after witnessing the mutiny, you know, he basically felt completely betrayed. Here's this person he'd been working with for years, and all of a sudden, out of left field, she assaults her captain and tries to fire on a ship.
Right. I agree. And again, just they're coming together. As you said, was good. So you liked the test that the captain was giving, because so here's again going back to the Michael Sue thing. She walks in and she's like, you know, I know, how dare you? I was a Starfleet officer. I would never help you create a biogenics weapon to defeat the Klingons. I am above that. And she was wrong, and that he was testing her. So how did you feel about those two pieces?
Well, it's just one more case where they're trying to make her sound like she's the good, righteous character who's going to stand up for Federation values, but everything we've seen her do contradicts that. Not only did she break into a top secret facility, but I mean, she's completely insubordinate. She's rude to everybody she meets. I mean, people just say, "Hey, what's your name?" and she won't say anything to him just to be a dick about it, I guess. And the thing is that you know, they taunt how she's, you know, the only human to make it through the Vulcan Science Academy. Well, is it illogical, or is it logical to be rude to someone who you don't know?
Right. Sorry, I was listening to you, but I was funny what Mr. Pete 8680 said too. Springtime. Later, Michael had a sex, skin color, and species change surgery and became Cybok. And I think that's how you fit all of them together.
That would actually be the only way you could explain her in canon, I think.
It all fits. It all comes. It's the only way to keep the Prime line. So.
But at least Cybok is a more interesting character.
So okay, so then he shows her what's going on, and I love the part where he's like, "All right, so computer, why don't you go ahead and beam us from one part of the ship to the other part," which you said has never actually happened in the original series.
Well, no, that's the thing, is that they did do it in the episode, and I'm showing my geekiness here, but in the episode "The Day of the Dove," they did beam from the transporter room to main engineering, but they were talking about how risky that is. And keep in mind, they're in the transporter room doing this. But this captain just casually says to the computer from his quarters to beam them to a lab on the other side of the ship. And it's like, no, that technology does not exist. And they talked about in the original series how risky intra-ship beaming is. You could easily materialize inside a bulkhead, they say. But apparently it's just casual technology 10 years earlier.
Right. It's... again, I mean, maybe Section 31 specialized ship type deal. Just when you think about it, how hard could that be, especially if they're going at warp to do that? Man, I never even thought of it like that. So anyway, they take
and on the thing is that, and this is the other thing about why the timeline is all screwy. This technology that they're researching literally makes it possible for once it's perfected for a starship, but even now in their experimental stages, for an individual to be instantaneously transported anywhere in the universe. I mean, you know, they showed her in a matter of seconds was on the Andorian homeworld, sitting in the middle of the Romulan Senate on Kronos, and you know, he's showing her how great this technology is. And so but the problem is that means that either this technology can never be perfected, or somehow gets buried by the time the original series runs around, because of course they can't do that even in DS9 era technology.
Right. So well, and you like jumping ahead, man. So that's the big reveal.
Imagine how Voyager would go though if they could just beam everybody home.
Right. Exactly. So they get to the end, the big plot reveal. He's like, no, I'm not doing eugenics. What I'm trying to do is create a technology that would allow me to instantly appear anywhere so that we could kill everybody and then disappear before they got to us. And then he started beaming her from place to place, which, first off, that was confusing to me because he said we can only do it, what was it, like 1,000 kilometers or something at a time? Or he said we can only do it in so many places so many times, and the other ship could go from the Alpha Quadrant to the Beta Quadrant in no time at all. But here's the thing. Here's my geek coming out, and I know this because I'm doing the Dominion War series. Romulus, Andoria, or the homeworld to Andorians, Vulcan, and Earth are nowhere near each other. Talking about that, Romulus is in the Beta Quadrant. So how the hell she got to Romulus is beyond me. When they are specifically in the Alpha Quadrant.
Well, like I said, this technology is way more advanced than anything Trek has produced. Even the transporter thing that they came up with in Star Trek Into Darkness pales in comparison with this, because this does have the potential to send starships instantaneously anywhere. They would make the Borg look primitive as far as their transwarp capabilities.
And that's what I was going to actually say, is that this was a big plot point. So it's almost, something has to happen. Either they never achieve this, they never make this work, or it's not even Kelvin timeline. Because Kelvin, that was a big plot point in one of the JJ verses ones. And so it ends on that. Oh, and apparently, just so everyone knows, ships in that era have vents that lead to space so that it can be properly ventilated. So there's apparently, and this was just a kind of a, they were just trying to do it as a, I don't know what, you'd know what the shot's called, but it was trying to be like a zoom out shot. But the way they made it look is you go through a vent, and then that vent apparently goes into space, which seems to me would completely defeat everything that ship is trying to do.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
But obviously they're just trying to do a zoom out thing. So it ends on them destroying the ship, which was good. I was saying that during the entire time. I was probably annoying you because that was going to be a huge plot hole for me. They destroy the sister ship, which makes sense. And then they transport that alien there. Here's my problem with that. Is that I don't understand, and this isn't just Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek Discovery. They did it in TNG, they did it in the TNG movies, and they did it in DS9. They rely on personal shields or personal force fields way too much. Force fields require energy. Energy can be drained and can go away. And so they put this alien that is apparently the alien of the gods. They shoot it both on stun and on kill, does nothing to it, and they put it behind a force field in the captain's ready room. So I don't understand why people are stupid and put things behind force fields like that. Also, in the ready room, don't you think that when Michael walks in to have a conversation, she's going to be like, "So, why do we? What's going on with this thing in the force field? That doesn't make you look like a good guy." I mean, did you get the same opinion on that?
Well, that's the thing. I think that the captain of the ship is ultimately a villain. He's a slimy, mustache-twirling villain that our main character happens to be, see that, oh, he's up to something. And so, yeah, so now he's basically become the Weyland Corporation from the Alien films, where he's keeping this monster in his closet for reasons.
It's his pet. That's what Beyond News says. It might be his pet. So he's got a new... That's funny. So you do... I hate that. I would be very disappointed if this interesting character turns out to be a bad guy, especially for multiple reasons. First off, because he seems interesting, and to be a good guy would be kind of interesting to me. And just someone who accepts that this is what you have to do to win. But also, the male captain is the bad guy. Like, that's cliche to me. I hope.
Well, this show is Star Trek social justice stuff gone amok, really, and that's the problem. It's not that Star Trek has always been a very progressive show, but they're just like trying to push it so hard that it's just become, I know some of the paranoid, what are these guys calling, so MREs, whatever, the male
men's right advocates, MRAs.
Yeah. And of course, these guys are, for the most part, whack jobs, but they could watch this show and be completely justified.
I don't know. I don't necessarily want to go political with it, but I agree that I think that there are some things that are obviously left or right with it.
Wait, left or right? Tell me something that's right.
I said left or right. More left than right. The fact that they have war and that you sometimes violence is justified is not a left-leaning policy, in my opinion. So, I mean, there are some barely right things, if you will.
Well, no, because you see, apparently the Vulcans now, we didn't realize that the Vulcans are very much into preemptive strikes.
And apparently, we didn't even mention this on the previous episodes, but apparently they have their own good relations with the Klingons that doesn't extend to the rest of the Federation, which was special. Something that's brought up is that they have a lot more aliens on this than they did on TNG, and I think that was just due to lack of technology, cosmetics, and budget. So I like that there are more aliens. The Federation, in theory, shouldn't be mainly humans. In fact, humans should, if they are a majority, are barely a majority. You might see more humans than most other aliens, but just by a little bit. So I like the fact that there are more other aliens there. I think that's the way that it actually is. I think that it's just easier not to put cosmetics on humans. And that's why we never saw that in, the original series, TNG, DS9. I didn't really have an issue with that. Did you?
What, as far as the overabundance of alien races?
Yeah. I
do have a problem with it, actually.
I think it was always meant to be that way. It's just money limitations had always prevented it.
No, because, you see, the thing about the original Trek is, and by the way, this is not Gene Roddenberry's vision. I don't care how many Roddenberry fanboys there are out there. Roddenberry was not this diversity-loving guy that everybody makes him out to be, because, but we'll get into that in a minute. But the original Trek is about exploring the human condition. It's about an optimistic future for humanity. Now, yes, we have aliens that we meet, but the only alien featured in the original series was Spock. And it's just to show that, yes, this is and there are Vulcan Federation ships. Most of the people prefer to work with people of their own species, which I can kind of understand. That would make sense. So they're just trying to make it look like the Star Wars cantina scene on the bridge where, there's a couple of humans here, but hey, let's throw in the Daft Punk alien, as Mr. Pete pointed out, who, by the way, no, there's no explanation to whatever happened to Daft Punk. Let's put on the bridge of the Discovery. Hey, look at that. Did you see that gigantic blue-headed alien? I mean, what was that?
I don't know that I did. Where was that in the previous scenes or this episode?
This episode, there was an alien with a blue head that's about 4 times the size of a human head.
No, I don't remember that.
Yeah, just sitting at one of the consoles. And the thing about Star Trek that's different than Star Wars is that at least on some level, the aliens that didn't look human, so Vulcans, Andorians, stuff like that, you knew who they were. They established their cultures, even Tellarites and all that. And so if you saw a Vulcan or you saw an Andorian or you saw a Tellarite, you would know what's going on. You would have a good understanding about where they're from. They're just sprinkling in random aliens because the makeup guys and the CG guys came, hey, let's make a Daft Punk head. Yeah, that'll be cool. Hey, let's make a giant inflated blue testicle head creature. Yeah, that'll be awesome. And but there's no explanation, there's no understanding, there's no culture behind it. It's just eye candy for special effects. And, you know, as far as the Star Wars cantina, that makes sense because you're in an alien cantina. You're supposed to feel like, ooh, I don't know what all these things are. But on the bridge of a starship, you shouldn't have random aliens that you're never going to explore what the heck they are.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree with you. I think that it would be multicultural, even if you couldn't know all of them. I don't know.
But the thing is, you can explore multiculturalism without having to throw in 75 aliens. They did that on the original series, and they did it very well on the original series.
But in a universe where you have thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon hundreds of thousands of planets and systems within a federation, you would see that many different species on a ship. Right?
Well, technically speaking, if you want to say the Federation is 1,000 planets, then you should have very few alien or very few crew members that even look human. I mean, even humanoid. You know, you should have, you know, like on Orville, a much better Star Trek series. They have the hilarious gelatinous crew member who's trying to hit on the Doctor all the time,
which is awesome.
Yeah, I love that. And voiced brilliantly by Norm Macdonald. But the you know, that's what the crew should look like. You should see blobs of jello just oozing down the hallway and insects climbing on the ceilings and stuff, you know, if you really want to get into it that way. But the Federation is a human-centric organization. And so, and it makes it so that, and they don't do it because, oh, we're racist. They do it because, well, humans are the ones watching this show. Right. And we need something to identify with. And if we're trying to make it more and more and more alien, well, you take the humanity out of it. Right. And especially when, like, a Vulcan like Spock, you can identify with even though he's not human because he looks human except for his ears, you know. Even to a lesser extent, characters like Worf or Data, well, they look human except for he has gold skin or he has a bump on his head. But, you know, they have all this random stuff that doesn't look human. And so am I really supposed to care about them? I mean, I don't. And because none of them are developed at all, except for, how do you say his name again? Saru? Yeah. He's the only one that they develop at all. And even then, we basically just find out he's from a race of wimps.
Right. So I was being hyperbolic. Obviously, they say there's less than 100 member planets. During TNG, we know there's up to 150. I would say that the Federation encompasses thousands of planets, but 150 member planets, or 50 member planets. So one last thing, we're about to be done, but Lieutenant Stamets intentionally slowing down research. What do you remember anything about that? So Shifty says, I was late. Have they talked about Lieutenant Stamets intentionally slowing down research? So confused about what exactly am I watching?
Well, he was saying, like, because remember his partner on the other ship was pushing way beyond what Discovery was doing, and Stamets was concerned for safety issues and stuff, and that's why he didn't want to push it that far. But the captain was always trying to push Stamets because the other ship was making a lot more progress than they were. You know, that I don't, you know, and part of it I think was that, you know, he thinks that the captain is a warmonger that just wants to use this as a weapon, which of course is true.
Well, here's the thing. I don't like the way they did it. I think he committed treason and that he should be in a jail right next to Michael. I do think, and I do like the fact that they bring up characters that just want to be explorers, because that was the original mandate of the Federation, or of Starfleet. And it's interesting to me that they keep bringing that up. I wish they'd do it a little bit better, but I like the fact that you do have people who are saying, we're not supposed to be killing people. We're not supposed to be in a war. We're scientists. We're explorers. That's what we were told we were going to do.
But that goes back to the whole, I mean, and I know you did a video about this, which I disagreed with on a lot of levels, but that's you.
Yeah, you rarely agree with my stuff.
Well, that's not true. I agree with you on some things, just not much that has to do with Star Trek. For one thing, I know how to say Trek. But anyway, the Federation is the military of the 23rd, 24th century. I know a lot of people don't like that, but it's a fact. You know, and you have the starships are the only, and I say only, defense against foreign aggressors. They are the only source of military power for the Federation. They have, and in fact, it's funny because I just watched Star Trek 6 and Star Trek 2 in the last few days. And they quote all these Starfleet regulations having to do with combat zones, combat situations, how to deal with tactics when dealing with the enemy. You don't do that if they're explorers. If you're going to go on to an exploration vessel right now, yeah, they might have some firearms in the locker to defend themselves against pirates or something, but you know what? They're not going to have missile launchers and torpedo tubes.
Well, I mean, there are vessels that have defenses that aren't military ships.
Name one.
Name a ship that has
any type of ship that has serious combat capabilities.
Okay, so that's non-military. That's moving the goalpost. I didn't say serious combat.
A Federation cruiser like the Enterprise from the original series is one of the most powerful ships in the galaxy and can take on a Klingon warship directly.
Sure. So this was addressed in the video, but at that point I would agree. However, after they won the Cold War with the Klingons, I would say that the Enterprise in the Next Generation, while still a pretty powerful ship, was nowhere near what the Federation could actually do, which is why they got curb stomped by multiple different species.
Well, except that, and that's the problem, is that, and this is one of the reasons that while I'm a huge Star Trek fan, I am not a Gene Roddenberry fan, is, when they try to get into this whole Starfleet is not military in the Next Gen era, which is ridiculous. I would buy that if there was another military. If there was something besides Starfleet that was out there patrolling and defending and all that. But basically they want to have their cake and eat it too, because the Enterprise in that series is sent out to defend, is sent out to confront. Granted, not every episode is like that, just like not every episode of the original series is like that. And it's asinine that they put families on the ships. But they do it anyway because I think Starfleet has become too content and too basically they think that they're unbeatable. But yeah, the Enterprise and other Starfleet ships, even in Next Gen era, are the military might of the Federation. There is no other military, and you would have to have something else if you're going to say they're not the military.
So. Last piece, and then we'll be getting off because it's kind of late. What do you think about, because this was brought up, Shifty was asking what happened to the sister ship, which they blew to hell. And I'm glad that they took care of that they addressed that, but there's a good point to that. Why wouldn't they put a skeleton crew on it and fly it back to a Federation facility?
Yeah, that's actually, when they blew it up, I was thinking, wait a minute, so... They already established, right off the bat, that the Discovery and her sister ship are the two most advanced starships of their day.
Right. And the Glenn figured out how to do it, so the technology's on there that they can now move so fast.
Right. But these two ships are the two most powerful ships in the fleet. They're the most advanced ships in the fleet. They have the best research facilities in the fleet. And, the crew's dead on that one. Better blow it up then. And it's like, well, I could see that if they were, say, behind enemy lines, if they were deep in Klingon space, that would make sense, because that actually would follow through with the United States military policy. Like, you can't abandon a tank or something behind enemy lines. You have to destroy it to prevent the enemy from getting it. But in this case, they show that they have tractor beams. They used them in both the second and third episodes of the show. And in the second episode, they show that they can tractor a starship, not just a shuttle, because they pull the Shinzo out from a collision course with an asteroid with a tractor beam. So why didn't they just tractor it away? Even in the original series, when the Enterprise comes across the Constellation, a ship of the exact same mass as the Enterprise, they hook it up to a tractor beam and are planning on taking it back to Starbase to be fixed, but then the Doomsday Machine comes up and messes up their plans. So it's not like there's no reason to destroy the ship. That made no sense whatsoever.
Well, and the other thing to it, I guess, and my point I was kind of discussing with you was we have no reason to believe that the engines still don't work. They don't have to use the super ultra mighty whatever green engines. Just use the regular warp core that it comes with, right? And put a skeleton crew on it and fly it back. And if you run into any trouble, bring them both out of warp, beam the people back, and then blow it to hell, and then run. You know, it's not like you can't do that.
Right. Well, and they established in the first episode that they can scuttle the ship in a matter of seconds.
Oh yeah, I forgot to bring that up too. I mean,
yeah,
that would be scary if a ship could be that quickly. You could destroy a ship that quickly. That seems like a very scary thing to me.
Which, by the way, was one of the most worthless moments in Star Trek history, because if they're going to self-destruct, first of all, it's like, wait a minute, you self-destruct a starship and it just scratches the Klingon ships?
Right.
But they should have made it. I mean, you didn't care about the Admiral because he was a douche. You didn't care about, and it was like, it was just stupid. It was just a special effects bonanza, which is really the problem with this series as a whole, is that it's beautiful, but there's nothing underneath it except for some thinly layered social justice crap. There's no real deep meaning to it. It doesn't feel like Trek in any way, shape, or form. Because the funny thing is that they're trying to go all hard left, because Star Trek has always been a little bit on the liberal side, but they're trying to go all hard left now with it, and yet they're making it into this war, and it's like, make up your mind.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of people get upset because it's not Gene's his vision, and I like the way Red Letter Media put it, and this isn't to be this isn't to put down the dead or to be not dishonorable, but it's not meant in a negative way. But Gene's been dead for what, 25 years now. I think it's okay to have it expand. He should have not.
Oh, I don't care about Roddenberry's vision per se.
But so we're going to end it on this. So Hesmix brings up a point. I'm a bit behind on the video, so excuse my late comments. It was asked how she went from Andoria to Romulus. I don't think she actually went to those places, just saw them. Then that's very confusing. What did they need the algae or spores for?
Spores, yeah.
Yeah, why didn't they just use the regular technology,
Well, it would, even if she did just see them, that would still be an advance in technology beyond anything in any prior Star Trek, because that means you could literally spy on the Romulan Senate while they're in session.
Right. Well, or he might be saying that they're just a holographic image, but it makes no sense. The spores don't need to be in there. They can do holograms without the spores.
Right. Well, yeah, obviously this was not just some holographic representation of what could be done. Either she was transported there or she was seeing them in real time, right. One of the two. But and either way, that would be a leap forward in technology beyond anything Starfleet has ever had, right, in any iteration of Trek.
Yep. And it's a really good thing, Shifty, that it's not Rick Berman's vision, because Rick Berman is the bane of all that is Star Trek. Star Trek.
Well, let me address that real quick, because I know you want to wind up and stuff.
We're going to end it after that.
But as far as adhering to the vision, like you were saying about Red Letter Media, I'm not saying that Trek needs to be, I certainly don't want just a rehash of Next Generation or something like that. I am all for them moving forward, doing different things. Like the visual style of the show, even though it's different, I'm not necessarily opposed to it, except for their rehash of the Klingons. But if you're going to do something in Trek, then you have a couple of choices. You can push it further into the future and explore something new, like they did 3 times now. They did it with Next Gen, they did it with DS9, they did it with Voyager, where they were like, okay, we're pushing it a little in the future, we're creating some new circumstance, and we're going to explore it from there, and that's great. Or you can go back in time and do something that's in established canon already. So now you have a show that takes place in between Enterprise and TOS. And the problem you run into here is not the visual style. I get it. TOS was made in the 60s, so you're not going to make it look like that. That's fine. But if you're going to set it in between, then you have to adhere to a certain level of canon. If you're going to say that 10 years before Kirk, we had visited Romulus, that we had tribbles, that we had holographic projectors, that we had all this technology. And by the way, you know, the Klingons decloaking, when the first sighting of a cloaking device was in Balance of Terror with the Romulans, the Klingons didn't get it until a season later in the original series. So you have all this stuff that makes no sense as far as canon. It does not fit at all into the post-Enterprise, pre-TOS timeline. The only way to reconcile that is to put it later in the future, which would make so much more sense. If you create a circumstance, say, after the end of the DS9 series or after the end of Voyager, where hostilities break out between the Klingons and the Federation, and now they're trying to develop this technology because the Federation is going to lose the war or something.
Well, Red Letter Media brought it up, and then we really do need to end. But Red Letter Media brought up a good point. I think Star Trek has burnt itself out on war. I think that DS9 did really well, and I think that then you had the JJ verse, and it's just the same thing, just rehashed. With lots of lights and lots of combat and lots of graphics. And I mean, people enjoy that. People like that. You and me like the visuals. But we can only watch Federation ships fight other ships with nothing else added to it for so long, you know? And the one thing about Discovery, the good thing, I guess, is they are trying something new. They're making it more a drama, more everything's connected. You don't have a bad guy of the week that they have to deal with. So they are trying new things, but it's still just another Federation ship fights other ships. So I don't know. I guess we'll just have to see, because guess what, guys? We are doing this every week. We will be starting at 8:45 to 9 on the dot. We will not have the issues we had last time. Fun thing about this channel is, apparently, like Twitch, you can also sponsor this channel and get cool little icons that I have to create if I actually have 2 sponsors. So consider sponsoring the channel just like Twitch, though you're only supposed to be doing that on gaming. If you want me to take a look at specific lore, just let me know in the comments. Not right now while we're live. Wait for it to get done, then put it in those comments so that I can record it. If you want it brought to the beginning of the line, I do have a Patreon, patreon.com/lore reloaded. Please help me put my kids through school by supporting the channel. At the very least, don't forget to comment, rate, and subscribe. Everything will stay absolutely free, so you can consistently stay a part of this for free with no other things. We will be seeing Michael and me next week. Tomorrow, I will be coming out with the next video in the Star Trek Dominion War section. We'll be talking about Section 31. I will see you guys on the next Lore Reloaded.